Well, folks, welcome back. Now I'm going to tell you about my last flight in the T-38 in May 2006. But the story actually begins in 1988, on July 15th, 1988, when I had my first last flight at retirement. That day I flew with Rick Lanier, Dobie Gillis, and Bill Hartree. Chris Bilbrey was my crew chief. And it's a flight I will always remember. When I taxied in that day, I sat there after engine shutdown and I put my head down and I said, God, thank you for letting me have this career. And I looked up in the heavens and thank God, and then hopped out of the airplane with the festivities. But there was something about me that was unsettled. It was just unsettling. And there was something in me that knew I really had not had my last flight in the 38. Be that as it may, I felt it that day. Okay, now what we'll do is we'll wind the clock ahead to the late 90s, early 2000s. And I had come into sobriety in 1994. And one of the things they teach us in sobriety is to give back. Forever give of yourself, give back for this gift of sobriety. It's not mine to keep, it's mine to give away. So I contacted the chief of aviation medicine down in San Antonio and explained to him who I was. And I said, say, if you would like, I will be more than happy to come down and talk to your folks about alcoholism, but from the perspective of one that's walked through the fire, as opposed to the academic side of the house. Well, that kind of intrigued him. So he invited me down to meet me, and at that time I was flying with Northwest Airlines, so passes weren't a problem. So I flew down to meet him, and as it turned out, we all met for lunch that day. There was Colonel Bob Ireland, and there was a chief of psychiatric down there. This was at Brooks Air Force Base, or the chief of psychology, the chief of Air Force flight surgeons, and a few other dignitaries. And one of Bob's horse holders, who was Lieutenant Colonel. He and I were the only two lieutenant colonels there, although I was retired. At any rate, so we go to this Mexican food place off base, and as we're ordering, I began to explain to them what I was all about, and give them some background on me, and then a little bit of background on how I stumbled into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And bear with me, this is not an AA meeting. At any rate, the funny thing was the waitress taking our orders stopped midway through going around the table, and she said, you guys better listen to him. What he is telling you is the truth. She says, I myself have been in sobriety for 3 years. Go figure. At any rate, so I talked to him about what I had to offer and the perspective and so forth. And Bob subsequently invited me to speak on the flight surgeons course about once a quarter. So about once a quarter, I'd fly down and to San Antonio and deliver an hour presentation. And it was during one of these presentations that it struck me totally out of the blue. It came to me, Terry Bradshaw's last, his speech at the when he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. And during that speech, Terry makes a comment about how he would love one more time to stick his hands under Mike Webster's butt to take the football. And I was so impressed with that. But at any rate, as I'm talking about my journey through my alcoholism and subsequent recovery, I kind of looked out over the crowd and I said, you know, what I wouldn't give to strap in that 38 one more time and hit a start button. Totally piggybacking off Terry's speech. Well, there was this major in the crowd, Major Paul Nelson, and Paul came up and introduced himself and had some very kind words, and we stayed in touch for the next few years, whatever they were. And I got a call one time from Paul, and he said, "How would you like to come down and give your presentation to our IPs and students on our safety day?" And he said, "I think I can work a T-38 ride in for you. We'll say no more." So we came up with a date, and I scheduled my flying around that date, and then drove down there. When I drove down, the first day I met the wing staff and had the opportunity to talk with them. But before that, I had breakfast with the DO and Paul and a couple other guys, and I was very impressed with those guys. At any rate, then I went into the staff meeting, told them a little bit more about what I was about who I am, and so forth. And then I got my ride in the T-38, and it was something that it's hard to convey what it was like. It was a very spiritual experience for me, if you want the truth. And I just had a ball. When we took off, I had forgotten how the air conditioner would spit at you. And, usually what you do when you on takeoff, the AC would ice up, and then as you got airborne, you got greater airflow through. It would start spitting chunks of, I say chunks of ice, but little bitty pieces. And when the IP went to turn up the heat, which the IP I was flying with went up to turn up the heat, I was almost disappointed he was doing it. I kind of wanted to sit there and let him hit me for a little bit. But at any rate, we got out the area. We were doing acrobatics. The thing is, we flew in a T-38C, and I'd only flown the T-38A. I'd never flown the C model. So all the instrumentation was totally different. So anytime I did any flying, it was totally by feel. Because he would say, "Okay, you want to pull 5 Gs on this maneuver." And unbeknownst to him, I had gone back and reviewed all the maneuvers. I had all the airspeeds and the G limits memorized again. Well, actually, truth be told, I don't think they ever went away. But at any rate, I would love to have flown the thing at 5 Gs, but with the new instrumentation, I couldn't find the G meter, so I just went on feel. It worked out fine. And then, a little bit into our profile, I began to feel sweat coming down off my eyebrows into my eyes. And that stings like hell, if you ever had that experience. And again, the temptation was to raise the visor, reach in and take the sweat out of my eyes. But I just wanted to kind of be with it. That was so darn much fun. And memories flowed back right away. At any rate, we flew the ride, came back in for some low approaches, and maybe touch and goes, I don't remember. And then we landed. And once you land at Columbus, it's a little bit of a distance to taxi from the end of the runway to parking. And during that time, the IP said, "Let's go cold Mike." So we pushed in the intercom buttons and then dropped our oxygen mask to kind of cool off. And during that period, I just sat back there. I had so many mixed emotions. I was so glad I had a career that I engaged in that I wanted to do since I was 4 or 5 years old. Then I looked up at God and I said, "God, thank you for that. And thank you for not letting me hurt anybody while I was doing this." And I just felt so grateful. And then I felt a wave of peace roll over me. That angst I had felt on the 15th of July, 1988, just went away. For somehow I knew I was going to fly the 38 again. And once I had that ride, I knew it was complete. And I've not had that yearning to fly that airplane, although I'd hop into it in a heartbeat. That angst just has not been here. So we taxied in and shut down, and then the next day I gave a series of talks. I don't want to say lectures, a series of talks. But on the first one, Colonel Lewis introduced me, Dave Lewis. And when he introduced me, he said, I first met Bob Holliker yesterday at breakfast. And he said, Bob is a guy I've known all my life. And I was so taken back by that comment. Here I just met this guy, and he had those words to say about me, and it just touched my heart. I started feeling nerves. How am I going to speak after something like that? But I stood up and managed to give a couple presentations after that. And you talk about rewards. As we were packing up to leave that afternoon, or the next day, I guess the next day, I saw this car drive by the BOQ, stop, back up. And this guy got out and he came up and he says, "Sir," he said, "were you the one that gave the lectures yesterday at the safety briefing?" I said, "Yes, I was, one of them." He said, "Well," he says, "I just want to thank you." He said, "That really helped me." So of all the students and the instructors there, that one guy stopping the car, backing up, and coming up and saying, "Thank you," that just meant, I don't know what was going on in his life, don't need to know, but that just meant a great deal to me. And I would be remiss if I didn't also mention how grateful I am to Paul Nelson and to Dave Lewis. I love those guys, as I love you guys. Take care and enjoy the day.